This is NBC News Update. Here is Mike Moss.
Good evening. A federal jury in Washington tonight found John Hinckley not guilty by reason of insanity in his 1981 shooting of President Reagan. The people of Britain got some welcome news this evening.
Her Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, has given birth to a baby son. God save the Queen!
The Florida Senate has rejected the Equal Rights Amendment for a fifth time, killing its chances for ratification by the June 30th deadline. And Dorothy Thomas, who is the mother of four and lives near Philadelphia, won $5.5 million today in the Pennsylvania lottery. I'm Mike Moss in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is NBC News Update, sponsored by Lipton. Here is Eric Burns.
Good evening. UN Secretary General Perez de Cuellar said tonight that his attempts to settle the Falkland Islands crisis peacefully have not ended. However, the British fleet in the Falklands is reported to be ready for a full-scale attack, and there are expectations of that in Argentina. In Britain, Prime Minister Thatcher says that her government will release a document tomorrow telling just how far away from peace the two sides are. Now this.
Salad lovers, Wishbone wants you to learn the word for robust Italian flavor.
Robusto.
Wishbone Robusto Italian dressing.
The names of 220 young men who did not register for the draft have been sent to the Justice Department, and they may be prosecuted. Altogether, more than 500,000 young men refused to sign up. I'm Eric Burns in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is NBC News Update. Here is Eric Burns.
Good evening. Senator Orrin Hatch, who is the chairman of that Senate committee investigating Labor Secretary Raymond Donovan, said today that a member of his staff received this threat: lay off the Donovan investigation or your wife will end up in a pine box. The first quarter of this year was one of the worst ever for U.S. business. After-tax profits of American companies fell at an annual rate of 17.5%. And a new pill went on the market today which doctors say will ease the pain for 22 million people in our country who suffer from arthritis. The pill is called Oriflex, and it's said to have fewer side effects than aspirin. I'm Eric Burns in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is NBC News Digest, sponsored by Polaroid. Here is Linda Ellaby.
Good evening. In Jackson, Mississippi, more than 6,000 people have been forced from their homes by floodwaters of the Pearl River. And this evening, flood warnings were issued for parts of Texas. 242 people were arrested in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol today. They were demonstrating, mostly by prayer and song, against the arms buildup, and that's illegal there. In that building tomorrow, the House and possibly the Senate will take action on funding the MX missile. Now this.
Now buy 3 packs of Polaroid film and get 1 free.
That's enough for Mother's Day, Father's Day, and graduation.
No, it isn't.
The Supreme Court has ruled that veterans organizations may lobby Congress and state legislatures and not lose their tax-exempt status. I'm Linda Ellerby in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is NBC News Digest. Here is Linda Ellerby.
Good evening. A Senate Judiciary Subcommittee was urged today to initiate laws that would eliminate parole for violent criminals. Among 6 witnesses was place kicker Mark Mosley of the Washington Redskins, whose sister was raped and beaten to death 3 years ago. The American Red Cross says it has been so busy with the unusual number of natural disasters this year, it's run out of money and is now soliciting more donations. 34 people have died in 5 days of tornadoes across the South. 6,000 people near the Pearl River in Jackson, Mississippi, are flooded out tonight. I'm Linda Ellerby in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is NBC News Update, sponsored by Michelob Light Beer. Here is Willie Monroe.
Good evening. In southern Poland today, the end to what is reported to be the last major resistance to martial law. More than 900 coal miners protesting the military crackdown have given up their strike after 2 weeks underground. The White House is expected to announce sometime this week new sanctions against the Soviet Union for its role in the Polish crisis. Wide-ranging actions, both economic and diplomatic, are being considered. And the U.S. is prepared to act with or without the help of its allies. NATO diplomats are warning against overreacting to the Polish crisis. Poland's ambassador to Japan, Zdzisław Ruraj, who defected to the U.S. last week, urged the U.S. to cut off all trade to Poland and the Soviet Union. I'm Willie Monroe in New York. More news later on this NBC station.